chapters 11 and 12, setting the stage for artful meetings and a personal favorite, navigating conflict. Good stuff. So how about we jump into chapter 11? Was there something that struck you that you would like to start off with in chapter 11? Go ahead, Sarah.
I was going to say, full disclosure, I haven't read 11 or 12. I'm just here today to learn from you guys.
All right, that's fair. Okay. We're going to let you stay. I like you so much, Sarah. I'm going to let you stay anyway.
You're not going to boot me out.
I'm not going to boot you out. I'm going to keep you here.
On page 233, where they said about the questions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, Julie Wrigley has already made, I'm not sure what that is. I'm sorry. Julie Wrigley has already made like a spreadsheet for when we're doing professional development this summer with those questions on to hand out to our staff.
Yeah, those questions, Angie, were great. I highlighted all of them. So
I have a tab
Sarah,
even.
Yeah, Sarah, if you don't have the book in front of you. So it's, what are a couple big lessons you're taking away from today? Which activities worked best for you? What didn't work? What questions or concerns do you have? And then finally, is there anything else you want me to know about your experience today? I think those are great questions. Yeah, I wrote that too, Angie, on my piece of paper when I kind of write what I'm going to ask everybody and I write my own notes. That was the first note I wrote too. Because I love that. I love the idea of feedback and asking for it and then what to do with it.
I know. I have to say this is our first time training, so I'm nervous about asking for feedback on the first way around. I'm like, oh no. But
I think you just got to take it sometimes, right? I think it could be so helpful. Especially if it's the first time you're doing it, because it's almost like you're not even cemented into how you're going to do it yet.
Yes, you don't develop the bad habits.
Exactly. It almost might be the best time to get some feedback because it's okay. You're not feeling as invested in anything you do. It's like, I don't know, I'm going to throw this stuff out and let's see what happens. And then people will give you feedback and you go from there.
That's what we're going to do. And we're going to give the paper at the beginning of the training instead at the end because they always want to leave.
Yeah.
Fast. And they'll just write nothing on it.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting, Angie? I really like that idea too. And when I give people paper, I've been doing that more, is let them sit with it.
Yeah.
Because then they might think of something as they're going through the day that they want to jot down on there. And then they may forget it by the end when you finally do ask.
Well, I know I do, because if there could have been something really great at 10 o'clock, but at 3 o'clock, I just want to leave. So I'm not talking about the 10 o'clock great thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The other, if we do things on a Google Form survey too, what I try to do sometimes is leave the form open so people can drop multiple comments in there. That way they can have it open on their phone, fill it out when something hits them and submit it, and then just open the form again. And sometimes that's a nice way to keep them adding things into it. And then you just collate that at the end.
Right.
Yeah, but these questions are outstanding. And I really like, my other comment I had was on page 236, where it talks about the feedback we get, and the feedback that she commented that she struggled with the most is when everybody says everything was great and says nothing else. And that frustrates me all the time too, because that doesn't really help you anyway. It's not helpful. And actually, when she commented that when she gets those kind of feedback pieces like that, she thinks it's a reflection on their organizational culture. So they don't share authentic feedback and their level of trust is low. And I thought that was really interesting too. This idea that can be an indicator of people that are not may be asked to give their feedback often, and when they are, it's not authentic in any way. So I thought
Sorry.
that was really good too.
My
That's okay.
computer just shut off.
Yeah, that's par for the course, right? It all worked out. You're back. It's good. The other thing
I
they
think, Mike,
talked
one of the
about.
hardest-
Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just gonna say, I think one of the hardest things is when people ask for feedback and then they diminish, like, oh, we've already made the decision, or you come back for the next session and it's the exact same.
Right.
And so I think sometimes that's when people are like,
Mhm.
yep, everything's great, because I think we've all
Nothing's
experienced.
going to change anyways. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And it makes sense what she had said in the book, because then that becomes kind of a learned response. Like, why would I bother?
Mhm.
Because no one's going to do anything differently. Yeah, because I agree. I've been in things where someone's asked me for feedback, and it's pretty obvious in their asking they don't really want to hear from me.
Hmm.
So they ask for feedback, but it's
Mhm.
pretty clear that that feedback is just that it feels like a formality, like, oh, we're just doing this because we're supposed to ask for feedback. But they're not going to do that to, like Sarah said, make any change to what they do or how they do it, or what I would get out of it as a learner. So that becomes really frustrating. This goes back to one of my favorite books, that Thanks for the Feedback book. I don't know who wrote it. I just know it's called Thanks for the Feedback. I guess I should have had that open if I was going to say something about it. But I love this book.
Yeah.
And I feel like Sarah, I probably told you 4 times already about how great that book. Thanks
Yeah,
for-
Gail Bowser loves that book too. So
It's so good. I think we talked about it once before. Yeah, Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. Thanks for the Feedback. The Science and Art of Receiving Feedback Well. It's one of my favorite books because it has the little subtitle underneath that. It says, The Science and Art of Receiving Feedback Well, even when it's off base, unfair, poorly delivered, and frankly, you're not in the mood. So I do like that because it's about how to take feedback. And
Hmm.
maybe, Angie, that might be
A book to read
some,
before I have to
yeah,
get the feedback.
Exactly, so that you get that sense of how can you take that and do something with it and make that worthwhile for you, because it is all worthwhile. And because I think when we start to realize that people giving feedback is rarely a direct attack on somebody, like it's
Right.
rarely a direct attack on a facilitator. It's really about the situation they found themselves in that learning experience. So I think if you try to remove yourself from that a bit, it makes it easier to take some of that feedback.
Sure.
You know, the thick skin approach to things. Like I can take it until it hurts really bad, and then you realize you can't take it because it just hurt too bad. That's good. Hi, Julie.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, Julie.
Julie, you're at the
Back on-
beach.
I
Too bad
am.
you're not really there.
I am ready. I am ready to be at the beach. So.
I was telling Mary before we all started, I'm out of my office today. I'm actually at the beach. We're doing a week-long training
man.
in Cape May this week. So the
Wow,
beach
lucky
is
you.
right behind me on this wall over here. Which is
Oh,
nice. I'd show it to you and rub it in, but it's not very nice out. So I don't know that you'd get, I don't think the rubbing in would be as fun. It's just not very nice out
We
today.
would still feel the rubbing in. Don't worry.
Yeah. Just look at my background.
Yeah. The other thing they talked about in chapter 11, which I'm curious if people do, is do you make a facilitator's checklist for meetings that you run?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Julie?
We
Sarah, do
should,
you?
though.
Yeah.
So from reading this book, I've started to, like, I've shifted how I'm preparing for meetings and how I'm planning and what I'm thinking. And we started probably 2 weeks ago doing like a facilitator's agenda and having these conversations before versus having an agenda for our participants. And it's been really eye-opening. I think it's helped because we're talking more about the why we're doing the work that we're doing. And it's making an impact too. The other thing we started doing is sharing the agenda ahead of time and asking our teams to add to it. Like, this is what we want to get out of this meeting, but we know this is a collaborative meeting. So like add what you need to get out as well. And it's shifted the dialogue that we've had with teams. And I think a little bit more of that building trust and people sharing more of what's happening.
Yeah.
So yeah. This book,
I
by the
like-
way, like super timely for me. Like I am loving and eating this book up.
I said it, Sarah, before you came in. I really like this book a lot. Like I'm really enjoy. I'm a little mad it sat on my shelf as long as it did.
Mhm.
I'm glad that we're diving into it, but I'm kind of annoyed with myself that I had it sitting there for so long in my pile and I didn't pull it out because it's very, very good. And I'm already
She
starting
also-
to go ahead. What do you think? Should we also what?
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say I'm actually starting to infuse some of this into a training that's coming up next week. So I'm excited to see how this kind of fits in with some of the other thoughts that I'm going to bring out there. So I'm excited. What were you going to say?
I was going to say she also has a podcast that I've started to kind of delve into. That's been going on for a very long time. And so it's been good. It's kind of a different way to digest this information.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Why don't I know
It's
about
called-
her podcast?
Because it's
Bright
called the
Mornings,
Blue
or-
Morning Podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she sends emails out every week. Like I get emails every week from her.
She sends constant emails, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of emails.
Yeah, I get some emails there. Yeah, that's me. Oh yeah, look at that. Okay.
Emails
All
from
right.
where?
From Elena Aguilar. If
Yeah.
you sign up on her website.
I see.
Oh, that's
So-
interesting. All right.
I did accidentally read part of this chapter last time. I don't know how. I just opened the book up apparently and started reading and then realized
Yeah.
in the wrong chapter. But one of my favorite sayings is that you can only control the controllables. And so like let go of the things that you can't
Mhm.
control. And I loved that on 240 where she talks about like before the meeting, you need to prepare your internal self. And
Yeah.
so like thinking about who you want to be and like what you want your participants to experience from that training or from that meeting or whatever that is, like that I feel like put into words what I've been trying to articulate for probably the last 4 years. Is that is where I think I spend a lot of my energy is thinking about like what do I want other people to get out of it.
Yeah. I think so too. I wrote down one of my things on my piece of paper. I wrote, yes, what does the group need from me? Who do I want to be? How will I communicate my intention? Yeah. I think those are great. And
I
don't
really
know that
like
I
this
did
chapter.
that. Yeah, I really like this chapter too, Julie. What's your big aha moment from this chapter, Julie?
There were several, and I might have missed you got in a little late, but I like
That's
the
okay.
asking for feedback, and I made I liked her questions, so for Angie and I were doing a bunch of in services this summer, so we made those up to use for all of our in services this summer because I think that'll be really important for us to kind of gauge what people are getting out of them, what they're taking away, if they were successful. I think that'll be really nice. So I really like that part. And then the putting on the finishing touches on the 241, just,
Mhm.
I think that's always so important, just setting the mood, having the environment be the way in a way that elevates people's mood and, is non-threatening. I think that's a huge thing. I always feel better when I go into a situation that's not quite as sterile and overwhelming. So I think that's an important part. Yeah.
I like
that.
how she said about, I don't think I've ever, very rarely in all the years I worked for my organization, have been where they set the chairs around. We're always at the tables like this. like a classroom with the presenter up front
Yeah.
presenting most of the time. I like the thought of maybe changing it up.
Yeah, I like that too. You know,
Don't look at us
it's-
like we have
it's
two
been-
heads, but it's
been
okay.
rare, but every now and then I've been in like a U, and then occasionally we have like small groupings, but a lot of times it's not, and I prefer it when it's not in a classroom style.
Yeah,
Doesn't make
I
for
think
conversation.
classroom style, it conveys something right away, and it's rarely a good thing.
Mm-mm.
What it conveys as you walk in. I mean, when I walk in something classroom style, I instantly am on edge a bit, and I'm trying to find a way that I can position myself in that classroom style to where I'm more engaged with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that sometimes what I'll do is I'll sit on an end row and I'll turn my chair so that my back's to the wall and I'm facing in. So I'm still technically in a row, but I've ignored the whole row concept and I'm facing in so that you can actually talk to someone else. I think that's,
Right.
I think especially, the things we're talking about is adult learning. And I think especially in adult learning, one of our key things we should be focusing on is how collaborative is it, and can we make it even more collaborative and conversational, and um, what are the ways we can find some opportunities to bring others in and let them lead some of the conversation.
Mhm.
Right.
And classroom rows are not the way to go.
Yeah.
No, they make conversation difficult.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm always a pusher of the book, the Accelerated Learning Handbook. And a big chunk of that book is what they talk about is preparing the learning space, which is what that part of page 241, Julie, was really about. Like, what does your learning space look like? And how do you make it engaging for people? How do you give people different spaces in the room to learn differently? Like, are there spaces for standing? Are there spaces for sitting on the floor? Um, are there other tables that they could spread out a little bit at? And just thinking about what does your setup look like beyond snacks and things like that. Those things are important too. But is the space inviting to people as they walk in? Like, I have to tell you, again, we're in this hotel today. It's down at the beach. The training room might be one of the most pleasant training rooms I've ever been in. It's beachy. There is different beach things in the room. It just has a really nice feel. Uh, and I don't know. It made me feel better as I walked in this morning. So I think that's, a good thing.
Nice.
I just went to a community strategic planning session, I guess you could call it, last week. And one of the things similar to this is accessibility. It was really inaccessible. Everyone kept saying like, oh, I don't need to use a microphone. I'm loud enough. And there were so many times where I was like, I can't hear what people are saying. There weren't any like slides or anything. She just had like a little chart note paper that she was writing everything on, and it was really hard to see. And the tables were all, it was just like having done strategic planning for teams and then walking into a session where it isn't as accessible was really hard. And it made me start to think about the trainings that we're doing. Like, are we using closed captioning? Are my slides and the text accessible? Because I've walked out of trainings where they haven't been.
Right. Right. No, I agree. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago, and I was there the entire day, and I presented last, and my session was the only one that somebody used captions in. And so I chose to take that moment. It was interesting because my session was also in the main ballroom where they had like the opening and the closing, and they just put me in there. And so I was in this very large room. And then I realized as I was wrapping up my session for the day, people were drifting back in for the after conference event. And I chose that moment, Sarah, to make a stand and say, and point that out about captions. I was like, as we go forward, one of the things I'll leave you with is thinking about the accessibility and the inclusiveness of your session. And it can be as simple as turning these captions on, and that's it. I didn't ask any of you if you needed captions. I turned them on as another option for all of you to learn as we went forward. And, you know, whether it had any change, I don't know.
I
I
use
hope so.
captions.
There you go. I mean, and they're really powerful. And again, I think even in our session today, Kelly Fonner is here all week. That's who's doing the training, as Kelly is. And she just put them on without even thinking. And there are times where I think people see that and they're not accustomed to seeing that. And it takes them a minute, and you see them looking, and they're like talking about it and pointing at the captions, because it's giving them something that they haven't considered as part of a setup. And maybe that will change their practice as they go forward, seeing how easy it can be to do something like that. I hope so.
Doesn't take much.
Chapter 11. Go ahead. What else? What else you guys got? Grab you
I
on
just asked
chapter 11.
community. I'm in the community action team meeting, and we have there's silos, and it's just like it's set up as a presentation. Somebody's going to present and tell them what they're doing. Okay, and then we go do a round robin of what a little bit of what everybody's doing, but it's like it needs to be more cohesive. So I just sent a note to the coordinator. She's in job services. Okay, this is a community thing, right? So we have like people like refugee, the village neighbors, we have valley neighbors, we have the college, we have schools, we have community partnership, which is heating and electricity, and they're also getting the homeless into yeah, a shelter, all that whole community. And we need to get whole things together, because so many things have fallen down. Like we had the neurodiverse school that failed, this failed, TBI failed, blah blah blah. So I just sent her a message that maybe she said she didn't have a presenter for September. So maybe this meeting we can, attempt to change the way we do the meeting, instead of having a presenter. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, how do you change from the presenter mode and, go around robin and all that to, okay, we're gonna change the focus of how we do these things.
Well, first of
I
all,
could
Mary,
appreciate some suggestions.
yeah, I love the idea. I had like 4,000 suggestions in my head, but I think the first one is just recognizing that the structure of that might not be working for what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that's a very good topic. It's really about group efficacy. How do we make sure as a group we are efficient and we're using our time well so that people want to come back and participate? I don't know, what are some ideas for Mary that you all have? How can she approach them and have them talk about this of going into?
Schools are silos too. They need to be involved in the community. They need, we
Right.
need to get it together here. It's just not the school, don't just isolate yourself to the school, because those students are going to be out there in the community. And I
Right.
have all kinds of people who are homeschooled. So, what happens to them?
Yeah, yeah. And really this idea of changing the meeting, it could be as simple as reminding people that as adults and professionals, we all have things to share, and let's find a better way to structure the meeting so that we all have opportunities to share what we know to make us all better. That's how to break down a silo, is you just make that statement that this is about all of us, and about us sharing everything we know with each other. What does everybody else think?
Yeah.
I I think talking about like what the purpose or why you're meeting might help too. Like if it is to just share information, okay, then do you need to be meeting, or could you do that in an email beforehand and almost flip the meeting then and engage in conversation? And I am a strong proponent of that, regardless of what the topic is. I'm learning with and from the other people in the room as well. And so maybe starting with those partnership agreements that she talks about in the book, in terms of, you know, what is important for people, what we all like this format, like this engaging dialogue conversation, but there might be people in your group who really do learn and like that style too. So kind of talking to the group about what do we want to get out of here, what's important, doing some of the partnership agreement work and then shifting.
Yeah.
We have a volunteer thing going at the community partnership. They're selling their place downtown, and they're buying a new place, and they're painting picnic tables, and they're getting the playground ready. So June 13th, we're having volunteer effort, and I was just thinking maybe I could just start discussing this, at that at that point with all the volunteers, because they're going to be there. So, and it's going to be an informal type of thing, so you can kind of, we don't have to go by an agenda, right?
Mhm.
We could just talk, right? So
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it, and I think Sarah's got a great point. That idea of knowing your group and the way they want to learn, and changing it and putting it on its head and making it completely interactive might actually be worse for everybody else in the group. Although it might be better for you as a participant, it might not work for them completely. And are there ways to offer options or opportunities um, for them to learn together, learn separately, learn individually? The introverts, extroverts in your group. How do you make sure you get them all involved? Um, I like to think that a lot of that is just giving variety of the things that you're doing. And anytime you have one activity, are there ways for people to do it individually if they choose, in a group if they choose, quietly writing it down or verbalizing it to other, like, can you give enough option as people move through things, that you hit as many people as possible? And then ultimately ask a lot of questions at the end when you evaluate, like, how did this go? What did you like? What didn't you like? Because Mary, if you drop this on your group and you realize you're the only one who wants this, I mean, that's not going to move your group
fly.
forward. Well,
Right.
yeah, because your group won't move forward then, and it's just not. It's just not something that's going to be a plus going forward as your groups. Yeah, that becomes interesting too. In her checklist, in this chapter, there is a whole grouping, a whole section on collaborations. Are there structures for participants to learn from each other? How often do they talk to each other? What is the purpose for each talk time? Are there opportunities to hear from each other in a non-verbal way? And I like that idea, like the question that she says there, that idea of, are we writing down ideas that others can come back to, perhaps? So it doesn't have to be turn and talk. Because, I mean, how many people have you seen in a session that don't want any part of that? They don't want to turn or talk. I'll admit, I was in a conference last week, and I got dropped into a turn and talk that I just wasn't really feeling at that moment. And I just said to the person, I was very honest with my partner. I was like, I have to tell you, I wasn't paying attention. I don't know what I'm supposed to be talking to you about, but I'm willing to talk about anything right now, but you have to lead us, because I just wasn't listening. That wasn't what I was looking for. And so you got to catch people where they are and when they're in those different kind of moods, I guess. Give them enough options.
Yeah, we aren't talking to each other. We're just listening, and yeah. So
Yeah,
I have a
at
thought.
the end, sometimes they get together, but a lot of times they don't.
Yeah, that could happen. Yeah, for sure. Hi, Mia. What is your thought?
Hey guys, sorry I was late.
Hi.
I just think that if we I like all of these thoughts, so it's really a yes and. I think that as long as the goal is clear about what we're doing in our conversations, then those kind of collaborative or cooperative, types of activities are okay, right?
Right.
As long as the goal is clear. But to just have a turn and talk, just to have a turn and talk, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and I think that's where we have to look at and be very mindful of the clarity of our goals.
Yeah, I think that's valuable. I think that makes a lot of sense. And if I could reflect on what happened to me last week, I think part of the turn and talk is I didn't feel like it had any validity into what we were doing at that moment. I was like, okay, I feel like you're putting this on me just for the sake of putting it on me and saying that, look, I had people involved, and it didn't feel like it had any value to anything we were doing at that moment. So I kind of checked out.
Oh yeah, and people do it all the time in professional
Yes.
learning, right? That's why professional learning gets such a bad rap. Is that, it's really funny. I was in yoga the other day, and the guy is a former teacher, and I was telling him what my role was, and he was like, "Oh, you're the people we hate," and I was like, "What?" He was like, well, I didn't do it for the district. I wasn't on the professional development team for the district. I did it for fiddlers, and most of the people who came to our things were willing participants. It was the coalition of the willing, and I'm like, we've never. I said we rarely ever have complaints regarding our professional learning, because we are very cognizant of adult learning principles and making what we do valuable and a value. And the lady that was standing next to me was like, oh yeah, she's like, fiddlers, those were the best trainings, like those are the best professional learnings. He was like, oh okay, but truly district PL gets the worst rap, because people aren't, and I think part of it is because they're not trained. Like they have no training in what goes into making a good professional learning. They don't do these book studies.
Right.
They don't, they might not have a good idea of adult learning principles. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think if you think about some of the kind of learning experiences that you're forced to do in a school, and you think about what a lot of those topics are, a lot of it is you are forced to go do this, and someone has to give you these 18 or 20 slides just to be able to say everybody got these 18 or 20 slides.
Right.
And so they can check that box off. And I think you're right, Mia. I think that there are many times you talked about the coalition of the willing. I don't know a lot of times if the presenters are part of the coalition of the willing. I think they have been drafted into this. They have been voluntold, you were going to lead a session about, and this is what you have to get across to people, and you have 40 minutes to do it, and good luck. And
Yeah,
don't worry, because we're going to force them to come anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, 100%. And death by PowerPoint, right? They just give you this PowerPoint. Yes, and yes.
Yeah, it's really crazy. But then, don't you think it's interesting? Because how many times have people gotten pushback from administrators of not spending time learning how to do this better, learning how to be a better presenter, a better facilitator? Those are sometimes felt like the soft skills that there's an assumption everyone has. And that's pretty far from the truth for a lot of people. This is not an area that people are comfortable in sometimes, but yet they are thrust in it, maybe for no other reason than their position in an organization forces them into, you are now the person who delivers training. Good luck, whether they want to be that person or not. And the flip side of it is, how many times do people who want to do this not get an opportunity to, because they are not in those positions that share information? You're in the audience, you're not the speaker. but I could be the speaker. I have the information to share and the interest to do it. And I think both of those scenarios, that's what leads to a lot of these kind of crummy experiences that we've had to sit through at times. So I don't know what that means, any of that, but yeah, I think that's just kind of, I don't know. Any other thoughts about chapter 11, or should we talk conflict? Who doesn't like
Well, I
talking
was
about
thinking
conflict?
maybe if we do that, the presentations,
Yeah,
for my meeting, if they did
yeah,
it like, if they learned how to do like YouTube and do it on YouTube and just make a video of it. So, because you don't really want it in an email because they're not necessarily going to read that either,
mhm.
right? If you do a video, they might look at that.
They might, and even maybe that shift in itself, Mary, is enough of a shift. Giving them options for how they interact with that information. If you're telling me something that you don't want my feedback on, record it and send it to me. I'll watch it on my own. I'll pick and choose the time that I squeeze that into my calendar. And I'm sure we've all been there. I'm sure we've all shown up for some kind of webinar and realized that there's no chat button and there's no question and answer button, and you don't have the ability to turn your mic on. 9 times out of 10, I will hang up almost instantly from a webinar like that. If there's not even a path for me to participate, I'll just wait. You'll send me the recording at some point, because there's no reason to be there in real time, because then I can watch the recording and I can speed it up. I can jump around a little bit. I can choose how I go through that. And so that's always my thought about virtual meetings and webinars and stuff like that. So let's talk conflict. Chapter 12, navigating conflict. I love this chapter. I like conflict. I don't know. That might be me. That might just be me. I like conflict. I like moving through it. I think it's great. She talks about this idea of healthy conflict and unhealthy conflict. And so thinking about healthy conflict, which even though this is called conflict, if you told me this is what we were going to do, this isn't conflict at all. This is just good interactions. Healthy conflict includes an exchange of ideas, a sincere asking of questions, a genuine willingness on everyone's part to listen, learn, and even experience moments of discomfort. Healthy conflict can make me feel nervous and excited at the same time. I mean, that sounds pretty great. I would welcome that in some things. What do people think about healthy conflict?
I think what I liked most in this chapter was on page 253, the sentence stems for healthy conflict. Just giving those ideas about how to approach that and what to say. I like that she gave those sentence stems for that, just to give me different thoughts on how to react, how to respond. It was nice.
I think Julie, this is a great example of a page that could be photocopied and pinned up on your desk.
Right. Yeah.
As you're interacting in team meetings.
Yes.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Was there one that was a favorite, Julie, that you're like, oh, I've never thought to do that. I'm going to try that one?
There's several that I like. I usually try to use that. I hear what you're saying, but have you considered? I like that one. Or can you, and just the original one, can you elaborate on that for me? So that I understand better, basically. I try to use those two a lot, but it's nice to have some other options.
Yeah, no, for sure. One of the favorites that I had put a little mark next to in the book, the sentence stem was, "That's an innovative idea." I like buttering people up with the beginning there. That's an innovative idea. I'm having a hard time imagining how that could work. Could you explain? And I like that. It's like, oh, tell me more. It's having them dig into a little bit of what they're saying, which I really like.
Right.
I'm trying to see if there was any other ones that I really liked. Yeah, I thought that one was really good. Well, here's on page 252, they do talk about the 5 indicators that tell you that the conflict is healthy. We wrestle with ideas, we ask questions to probe for deeper understanding, we change our minds, we demonstrate curiosity, we hold students' needs at the center of our work. To me, those 5 things could be part of the norms that we create for meetings in our groups. You know, we talked in one of the earlier chapters about norms and what our interactions look like as part of a team. I think to have those and review them and make them very visible in our conversations could go a long way to promoting this idea of healthy conflict and being responsive to each other in our meetings. So I really like that one. How about unhealthy conflict? Unhealthy conflict starts on 256. Unhealthy conflict can emerge from, or if it goes unchecked, can create a toxic culture. So that's where we're at with that. Unhealthy conflict.
I did like
regarding that. Oh, sorry.
No,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say regarding unhealthy conflict, I think possibly maybe all of us have been there. I know I've been there, and it makes it harder when the person's your boss, number one. So I feel like that is a very it's a very delicate situation. When the person is your coworker, I feel like you probably feel like you have more control. And I think that people who are bad with boundaries don't deal well with unhealthy conflict. And people who are good with boundaries just are like, I don't care. I'm just going to go report this and report that. I really feel like unhealthy conflict taps into those boundaries.
Yeah. I think you're right, because it's interesting. Page 261, there's a little box there, managing unhealthy conflict in the moment. And it just made me think of that when you started saying that, Mia. Ground yourself, acknowledge what you're feeling and take a deep breath, return to the team's norms, and share the impact on the team when a norm isn't adhered to. Identify the conflict or impasse, decide to address the conflict now or later. If necessary, address it in the moment. And then finally, to Mia's point, number 6 in that list, let it go. Maybe that's the approach to that. I mean, I'm sure we've all been there. I can think of many times I've been in my car on the way home from something, and I'm fuming about something that happened, and I realize I'm probably the only one that's fuming about that right now. Like, I don't know if the other person is fuming also. I'm like, well, then what am I doing to myself then? Why am I making myself just kind of frantic over here a little bit? Yeah. I think these are interesting, and Mia talked about boundaries. She talks in the book about enlisting administrators or supervisors. Of course, that's a little trickier if the issue is with an administrator or supervisor. So that adds a little other trick there that's a little harder to deal with. I'm trying to find if I have anything else.
I mean, I feel like I had in my professional learning that I provided, I had people come at me all the time. Like, there was always one, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. There's always one person in the room. And I don't know, Mike, if we're sadistic, you and me, but like, I loved it. I was like, bring it on.
I don't mind it.
Right? Like, I remained really calm, and I was kind of like, bring it on. And then I would just, kind of like, tell me more. And then I would just say, okay, well, we're going to table that until later, and we can help you, find resources for that or whatever. But in general, I always, like, that didn't necessarily bother me. Like, people questioning me it's more like it's more like unhealthy conflict that is like you and your boss or you and one of your coworkers that you have to work with all the time. That's the stuff that's not fun.
Yeah, because at some point, you're gonna have to make a stand of some point, of some kind. You might have to decide. You know, I think one of the last things that she talks about in the chat, yeah, it's the last section of this section on unhealthy conflict, is know when to go.
Right.
I mean, there might be a point, you know, there's a point where it just, that's it. I've reached the limit and there's nothing else we can do here. And you know, what are you going to do at that point? I'm sure we've all been there, where we've had those thoughts about, you know, can I continue to thrive here and grow? And I'll share a personal story. When I started my consulting company many years back now, I did it because I reached that point at a job where I realized there was no point in continuing on, because I was so at odds with an administrator, with my boss. And I realized that what my boss thought we should be doing going forward was almost the direct opposite of what I thought we should be doing going forward. And I just couldn't rectify that in my head. And so I had to go. Probably the hardest decision that I had made in a very long time. And it's been years now, and it kind of worked out, so that's okay. But it was hard at the time. It was really hard. There's all that other stuff that goes with it. Is that okay? You know, I think about what Mia's talking about, and that story of mine is that it's one thing to think you can't coexist with someone, a supervisor. It's another thing to be a grown-up and pull the trigger on that and realize, well, I still have to pay bills, and I still have to do this, and I still have to do that. And you have to weigh those things at times. And so I'm sure we've all been in situations, we don't have to acknowledge it out loud like I just did, but I'm sure we've all been in situations where we've had to make one of those decisions like, all right, I guess I suffer through this a little bit longer until I figure out that plan. Mary's smiling like somebody who lived through that.
Yeah. They wanted me to
So-
sign a warning, and I said,
I'm not
I'm not
ready
going to
yet.
sign any. I'm not going to sign any warning, but I will give you my 2 weeks notice.
We'll sign that. So yeah, I think they're interesting, and I
Excuse
think
me.
all of these. Yeah,
I
who
have
said
like
excuse me?
I think a group of 3 or 4 coming. Can we take that back table, or is there someone sitting? No, you're good. I'm just
Hey, Mia, your microphone's on. Where are you guys sitting? Oh, she didn't hear me. She didn't hear me.
We'll just go over here.
I don't even know that I can mute Mia because I'm not the leader of the session anymore because I'm on my laptop. Yeah, I can't even do it. She's got to just talk it through. So yeah, I think that's, you know, there's different things we're talking about here with the relation to unhealthy conflict, which is interpersonal conversations between you and supervisors, and that unhealthy conflict in a professional learning experience, which is kind of that other piece that Mia talked about. And those are tricky. And I like her ideas and her thoughts about how to kind of deflect and minimize the potential outburst and what it might cause. And I think sometimes that person who is engaging in that unhealthy conflict in a professional learning wants to be heard and perhaps is not heard very often. And so that's an interesting place to start, and they acknowledge that you hear what they're saying. And now might not be the right time, but that doesn't mean there isn't a right time. We'll talk about it, you know, like Mia said, we'll talk about it later. I'm happy to sit with you at the end. I'm happy to have lunch with you. I've had that in sessions where the morning goes horribly wrong, and I just kind of make a stand and say to that person, you know, I'd love to talk to you more about this. Maybe we can sit at lunch. And sit at lunch with that person, and they are perfectly pleasant, and we have a great conversation, and then the whole day goes fine. That person needed to be heard. They needed to be acknowledged in some way.
Lillian.
I can't stop her. I can't stop her from talking.
I'm on a meeting.
But Mia, you're,
I'm on a meeting, but I'm like, I know her.
I hope, here's what I hope before we finish up, is that Mia
Yes.
says something she didn't want to say, and we can't control what
It's
we
Mia.
hear,
No,
so that's,
I know.
awesome.
I just didn't
Oh, poor Mia.
You know what I mean? You see someone and you
oh,
feel
poor
for a
Mia.
while.
Mia did this to herself, so
Yes,
it's
exactly.
okay.
Whatever. She's got long hair, gray hair. I know. I'm like, come on. I'm just listening.
I think
Um,
somebody
other-
needs to mute because there's other
I know,
background.
I can't mute her, I'm no.
Oh, that's
I'm
you.
not I'm
Yeah,
not the
Mia.
host of the meeting right now, because I'm not logged into my right computer, I can't mute her. I can
Yes,
even kick
eh.
her out, I think. No, I can't do
That's
anything
you,
to her.
huh?
And let her just talk. She's just gonna keep talking. Other thoughts about conflict as we kind of come up to the top of the hour? Other thoughts of
Just
something you'd want to talk
The one
about?
thing I really liked, and she said it a few times in here, is about as leaders, our emotions are the most contagious in a group. You know, and Mia kind of touched on that a little bit there too, that, you know, we have tremendous influence. And if we're aware of our feelings and the way we, you know, react to things, that we have, you know, she talks about how we have tremendous influence and can use our power to influence how the group goes by the way we react. So I think that's always important to remember. You know, so and she mentioned that several times throughout this chapter. So I like that.
I think it's true, right? I mean, people are going to take their cues from you if you're
like, oh, I got to see Lillian. And then, you know,
if
Jen
you're
will
the
talk
person
about
leading.
Sandy.
I'm having trouble concentrating. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm having this whole
Mia.
conversation. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I know you. Thank you. There you go.
This could not even.
It's so funny. It's so funny. But yeah, Julie, I think you're right. And I think that sometimes if someone in a professional learning experience is looking for that to get a rise out of you through some kind of unhealthy conflict, the best thing you can do at that point is not
Right.
take the bait and just be very level-headed, because I think you're right. I think people in the group will take their cues from you. I
Right.
certainly don't think you should ignore it as the facilitator, because I've seen facilitators do that, and that just it makes it worse
Yeah,
so
you're right.
quickly. It gets so much worse, because then that starts to spiral on itself, and then that person gets emboldened, and then it just becomes worse. And so at least acknowledging it and being very upfront about, you know, what we're trying to accomplish there, and say, and getting that person hopefully back on track with the rest of the group. Or if not, I mean, I know I've personally, and again, I don't mind conflict, so that's okay. I've personally had conversations with people like, if this is not working for you, then maybe this is not where you should be today. And I'll leave it to you to decide. But from what I hear you saying, it doesn't sound like this is where you want to be. So maybe that's not the right spot for you today. Doesn't mean it won't be the right spot for you another day, but it's just not the right spot right now today. I always share, there was one experience. I was in a training in I won't even say where, it doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. And when I was setting up and first thing in the morning for a full day, one of the participants had come up to me and talk about unhealthy conflict. This was the first thing she said to me. Well, she said hello, and I said, hi, how are you? She's like, I'm great. How are you? Great. I'm excited for the day. This is me just kind of going into a routine of setting somebody up for the day of learning. And she said to me before we start, can I ask you something? I said, sure. Sure. She said, I need to know before we start today who you voted for in the last election, because I need to understand what your morals are and where you're at. And I thought, wow.
Oh my gosh.
I thought that is so odd, so strange. And I said to this person, I am not going to tell you that, because it has nothing to do with what we're doing today. And so that answer is just going to have to work for you. And she said, I don't know that it will. And she was the person that said, well, then maybe today's not the right thing for you then.
Oh my goodness.
That was after she told me I came from back east, and I thought back east was a troubling phrase. That was made me nervous, but it was fine. So she ended up leaving for the day. That's okay. Yours makes me laugh. That was
Probably
one of the
best.
silliest things that ever been said.
Oh,
One thing,
that's priceless.
one thing I hate is, you know, maybe I'm off track, maybe I'm whatever, but you know, it says, oh, I'll address that at the end of the meeting, and then they don't address it. They just getting rid of me. That really pisses me off.
Well, yeah, it's disrespectful to you as a learner, right? It's not. Now, if you run out of time and you don't get to it, that's one thing. But I have to
Right.
tell you, if I had said that to somebody and then I ran out of time, you would be the first person I found as soon as we were done. I was like, look, we ran out of time. I hear what you're saying. We didn't get a chance to address it because you're right. Why try to push that person back only hoping that you're going to run out of time? But you're right, Mary. I've seen people do that where it's like, well, we'll table that for later, and then later never comes. Yeah, and then that's the end. Yeah.
That's why I kind of like those feedback forms from the other one, because I thought that's a way for them to put on there if there's something you didn't address, or you know, and I like that she puts, you know, that she actually says her reasoning for asking people to put their names on them, you know, that's one of the reasons for that, because then if you put something on there that I can address, I know who it is I need to get to address it, you know, and
Exactly.
you know, and I can come to you and I can, you know, talk about your concerns or whatever, you know. So I like that.
I like that. I do like giving people the option of putting their name on something so you can connect back. I will add my name sometimes into the comments at the very end. Like I'm happy to own anything I just wrote to you. If you want to email me back and chat about it, I'm game. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't want you to be better at what you did from that. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, Julie. All right, everybody. Well, we've reached the top of the hour. Obviously, Mia got her table because she left. So
She left, yeah. She's done.
She got her table, and good for her. We are scheduled for our last conversation about this book on June 3rd. We will talk about chapter 13, which is the last chapter in the book. And then finally, kind of a general wrap up of now what? Now, what are you going to do with this? We'll talk about some of the appendices too, which are actually really good if you've been going through them also. Really nice tools and charts back there, which I really like. So we'll chat about those also. All right. Any final thoughts before we all go back to our day? Okay. Everybody, it was a pleasure as always. It was good seeing you. Good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thanks.
And I'll see you later.
Have fun.
Yeah,
Have fun
enjoy
at the beach.
Yeah, go to the beach.
Bye.